ghastly tradition of uh, um, political documentaries, which, as Jocelyn says and as Jack's pointed out, are very much about like being just super biased. It's just pushing one point. There's no sort of discussion or sort of ability to see the other point of view. The audience not given any other choice. It's just you go in, you get really angry, and then by the end of the film, you're just so angry you want to explode. But it's just a regular film. So there's nothing for you to do built into the film. So what I was interested in was, could we use video with the emotional connection that we, all love, plus interactivity, plus discussion to create a new sort of political film, which would have a number of characteristics. Discussion of sort of breaks for discussion, and this is something which Extinction Rebellion are great at. Breaks where it's all about share what you feel. No one's right, no one's wrong. This is what you feel. And so you just feel what you feel, provided you're not sort of bullying or anything like that. You can say anything you like. And they have this great phrase: "We welcome all people, but not all behaviours," which puts it, beautifully. So I thought, well, we could make a film which has that, which has discussion built into it. Then I thought we could make a film where we ask you questions. And so, given that there are facts about the world, we check with you whether you know those facts, and we also have a fact sheet so you can actually check for yourself. With a Michael Moore film, you're just taking his word for it all the way through. You believe, you don't believe, fine, but there's no way, if he says something or implies something, there's no way for you to check that. So I was thinking, well, let's get a fact sheet so that whatever we say, people can check it out. Um, uh, and and also one that allows people to have different opinions, and is about trying to kind of draw together a community of people to watch but also to speak and to get to know each other and to start thinking about taking action as part of the film. Yeah. So I've been interested in that for like about 15 years, and then I'm a lecturer at University of the Arts London, associate lecturer just sort of like a couple of days a year. But they have lots of Extinction Rebellion type people who are super, super passionate. And an opportunity came out to make a film sort of with them about the climate emergency. So what you need to pretend now is that you would be interested in watching a film about the climate emergency, okay? Because you are part of this film, all right? I think so. Just I know you don't give a fuck about the climate emergency. All you care about is writing a great script. But just try and imagine, just be the character of someone who you're watching this film because you're interested in the climate emergency. You don't have to believe anything necessarily, but just have a look and see what you think. So there are 4 bits. Each is about 12 minutes long. There's opportunities for you to discuss things after each of the bits. What I would suggest is try to think like a normal person, not a scriptwriter, for the purposes of this. And then at the end, we can talk about it as a script. From a script, think about the emotional arc. It doesn't have characters, but you see the first part is really depressing. And then the second part is like kind of grim. And then the third part is about solutions. And the fourth part is about inspirations. So there aren't characters, but there's a definite sort of down into the belly and then up and we go happy at the end. So keep an eye on that, because in the sense that, that is very strong. There's a very strong arc, even though there are no characters involved as such. Okay, so are we ready to go? Fine. Okay, so I will take you through the whole process, because one thing I should say is that feedback on the film so far, it's still in pilot mode, so it's not publicly available. Feedback on the pilot has been extremely, extremely positive. So while I can't show you any actual prizes for this one yet, it should be fine. So just a second. And where? Just a moment. Okay. So like I say, I'm going to show you the whole thing. Okay. So it starts with a warning. So can anybody not see a screen that says warning, the film's first 20 minutes? Cool. Okay, so the first 20 minutes of this film has lots of images of climate chaos, floods, fires, all that sort of thing. If you're going to be too upset, then please take a break now and maybe come back in 20 minutes. So this film will ask you questions. To answer, you just unmute yourself and say the answer. Okay? So we will have a little practice now. We've got a very difficult question relating to character motivation. And here we are. So which of these animals do you like most? If you like horses the most, shout horses.
Cats.
I didn't say cats. If you like horses, shout horses. No one likes horses. You're all horse phobic. Okay. If you like dogs, shout dogs.
Dogs.
If you like cats, was that an actual dog bark in the background?
Yeah, that's my golden retriever.
That's incredible. Jack, you're a genius. Okay. If you like cats, shout cats.
Cats.
Okay, fine. So it's mostly cats. Okay, but obviously, who cares? The important thing is, please be loud. Okay, normally we have about 20 people in these sessions. So each of you has got to have the volume and energy of 5 people, okay, which I know is going to be no problem for you at all. Okay, so that's not really relevant to you. Just be loud. Okay, so when you're speaking, please keep the microphone and the camera off. Jack, especially if you've got your dog in the background. If Microsoft Teams crashes, we've got this set up. Let's not worry about that too much since there's only 4 of us. I'll just email you if it crashes in terms of next steps. Sometimes the audio stops. If that happens, please just shout out. Fact sheets for the film are under construction. I'll show you the fact sheets afterwards. We will discuss after 10 minutes. If questions occur to you while you're watching, please put them in the chat. The session is being recorded. We might use bits of it in other videos. If you don't want to appear, please say so in the chat. This is an experimental pilot project. Please give your feedback at that URL, which I will paste into the chat. And if you want to, consider sending a 20-second phone video saying what you think to martin@martinpercy.com. Okay, so the first question is in about 1 minute. Let me just get set up. Okay. Okay, can anybody not see a blue screen with play film on it? Great. Are you guys still there? I'm suddenly not seeing any of you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's there?
Fantastic. All right, great. Thank you. All right, fine. So I'm going to press this button. Video will start to play. You should hear music. If you don't hear music, please shout out. Okay, and here we go.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
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 This is an introduction to the climate emergency.
And the ecological emergency.
And what you can do about them.
It's made by and for students and staff at the University of the Arts London, or UAL.
But it's free to anyone who finds it useful.
But this isn't a normal film.
We'll be asking you questions all the way through.
And here's the first one. What do you think? Should we teach the climate crisis at all? Yes, no, or maybe? Please choose an answer.
Okay, nice simple question. Please shout the answer at a count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Well, we think so too.
And in this film, we want to help you feel empowered and inspired, not defeated or depressed.
In the first part of the film, we'll be talking about the climate emergency. And then about the ecological emergency and climate justice.
It's uncomfortable viewing, but don't worry. In the second half of the film, we'll try to inspire you with positive action. We'll look at what we can do as citizens, and then we'll see some examples of what we can do as creatives.
But after the film, please tell us what you think. Just go to this URL and give us your feedback.
You might think that everyone now accepts that global warming is real, but that's not true.
I don't believe it.
So let's ask some really basic questions first, like this one. How much hotter is the world now than it was in 1880? 2 degrees, 1 degree, or is it not hotter at all? Because there is no global warming.
Okay.
Please choose an answer.
Shout the answer on a count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
2
degrees.
No, I'm happy to say that's not right. Have another go. How much hotter is the world now than it was in 1880? 2 degrees, 1 degree, or is it not hotter at all? Because there is no global warming.
Give us an answer.
Please choose an answer.
Okay, the answer on a count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
This is 1 degree then.
Okay.
You're right. We've got weather data.
Don't worry,
stretching
everyone
back
gets
to
that
the
wrong.
1880s. This was the world back then. And this is the world now. Much hotter. The 3 hottest years since 1880 were 2015, 2016, and 2019. Data from NASA, the US Climate Center, the Japanese Met Office, and the UK's Met Office all prove the same thing. The world is now about 1 degree Celsius hotter than it was in 1880.
But stop. Hang on a second.
Fake news is everywhere, so how do you know we've got our facts right? During the film, every time we say a fact, you'll see a fact number in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Just go to the same URL as for the feedback. There you'll see each fact listed by number and a reliable source for the fact.
That way, you can see the evidence for what we're saying and judge for yourself. So let's get back to the facts. 1 degree hotter doesn't sound like much, but it's been enough to increase the likelihood of some of the things you've seen on the news. Superstorms, massive floods, and gigantic wildfires.
Of course, storms, floods, and fires have always happened, but they're becoming more powerful and more likely.
According to NASA, 97% of climate scientists think that people have caused global warming, which is better called global heating because warming sounds too mild. In particular, it's caused by burning fossil fuels like coal and oil.
This puts massive amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, like carbon dioxide and methane, and that makes the world heat up.
Without major action to change our behavior, how much hotter could the world get by 2100, according to NASA? 2 degrees, 3 degrees, or 4 degrees?
Okay, on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
2
2 degrees?
No, sadly that's not correct. Try again.
Without major action to change our behavior, how much hotter could the world get by 2100, according to NASA? 2 degrees, 3 degrees, or 4 degrees?
On the count of three. 3, 2, 1.
3 degrees.
Three
3
degrees.
degrees.
No.
Whoa.
Sadly, that's not correct. Try again.
Well, we're going
Without
right
major
out of
action to
options
change our
now.
behavior,
Let's
how
go
much
for 4.
hotter could the world get by... Yes, unfortunately, you're right. According to NASA, without major action to cut emissions, global temperature is on track to rise by an average of 4 degrees C by 2100. But it could be even worse than that, because global warming may cause other, more extreme dangers.
The problem is that a rise in temperature can lead to a tipping point, where irreversible chain reactions are set off. Tipping points are a bit like a game of Jenga. You take blocks out and nothing changes, and suddenly everything collapses.
For example, steady increases in temperature made bushfires in Australia more likely, but life went on as normal. Then things reached a tipping point where an irreversible chain reaction started. And the bushfires of 2019 released 250 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So what do you think? Is it now too late to prevent climate collapse? Yes, no, or maybe not.
Okay, here's a tricky one. What do you think? On a count of 3, 3, 2, 1.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Exactly. We might not be too late, but we've really got to try hard.
As we've seen, humans have caused major climate changes already. And we've started a process which could lead to a climate catastrophe unless global behavior changes radically.
But that's not easy to do. Climate collapse is a global problem which requires a global response and local effort. Can we make that happen? We'll see. It's up to us what happens next.
Solving the climate crisis is the greatest and most complex challenge that Homo sapiens have ever faced. The main solution, however, is so simple that even a small child can understand it. We have to stop the emissions of greenhouse gases. And either we do that or we don't. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as if you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house was on fire. Because it is.
Now it's time for us to shut up and for you to think things over.
We're going to pause the video now for a few minutes. Please say how you feel about what you've just seen. And if it makes you want to take action, please say so.
Please don't feel shy. You have a right to your feelings and a right to express them. So now is your chance to do that.
Okay. Generally what happens, so this is the 14th screening of this film. The first 13 screenings, what's happened, which have mostly been to student-age people and a few sort of lecturer-age people. Generally what happens is people are a bit shell-shocked after the first part. Some people say, I want to see more about politics. I want to see more about intersectionality. I want to see more about racism and capitalism and sexism. Don't worry, hang on, that's in part 2. Some people also say, I want to see more about what we can do. I don't just want like paralyzing gloom and despair. I want to see action. Don't worry, that's in part 3. Those are the general reactions so far. Are there any thoughts that you would like to share? Any feelings or questions or anything at all? Key thing is, this is your time, and it always is when this film is shown. This is now the chance for the audience to discuss and say anything that they feel like saying. And that is, in terms of media, that is the key thing about this break. So is there anything you want to say?
Guess I can go then. I don't know. I didn't really feel a whole lot, to be honest. Not because I'm like, oh, the Earth is dying, F the Earth. But I don't know. I felt like it was just telling me what I already know.
But you got the questions wrong.
No. Okay, yeah. The question is short, but I mean, in terms of like, I'm talking about the images, the visuals. Like, that wasn't like it was meant to shock me, but it didn't. Like, I wasn't like, oh no, what's going on? I was just like, okay, it's this collection of images that are just disaster based. My thing was I wanted more of what are we going to do, which you said is coming later. But I wasn't really shocked or like affected by what I saw, to be honest.
Okay, so we've got Albert, who has no heart. Anyone else?
I think the most effective part for me was the fact that by 2100 we could be up to 4 degrees, which is quite mental. That's
right.
What, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that sort of surprised me, and the realization of what the consequences of that will be. The fact that we will probably have climate refugees will probably be the most common thing in the world in the future.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one key thing obviously is that the 2 questions, we specifically chose those questions because those are very obvious things that you would expect everybody to get right, which almost always people get wrong. And one of the things, obviously, from the point of view of using interactivity and using questions, is that if you can honestly trick people into getting a question wrong, you immediately open their mind to the idea that actually maybe they don't know quite as much about this as they thought. It almost never happens that people get both of those 2 questions right. Yeah. Anyone else? Jocelyn, Jack, or shall we push on?
No, Josh, you go first.
Okay. I don't really have anything else to add. I liked Jacob's and Albert's points. I kind of agree with knowing certain like visual things already, but I don't know what it is. Every time I hear Greta, it just shivers me somehow. I don't know why. It always happens. I've already seen this video like a couple of times, but it still happened again. And I really like that they implemented facts, and you can go to the source on the website, which is, I think, really helpful, especially if you want to read further into it. And it's not like, I mean, obviously in documentaries, you don't necessarily put in the facts in or like the source into the documentary. It's mostly in the credits, but at the same time, sometimes things get a little bit lost in editing, that you don't really have all the facts together. And here you can really see fact 1, fact 2, and you can just go and look up and research it for yourself, which I really enjoy. I think that's really good, well made.
Great. Okay, so let's have a quick little look at the fact sheet. So this is the fact sheet, and this has got all the facts. There are about 109 in the film as a whole, and everything is referred to here. And I do think that this is incredibly important, especially with something like the climate change, where it's so hotly disputed, and where even people who think they're experts have completely different opinions. So the question about how much hotter is the world now than it was in 1880, the official answer is on average 0.85 degrees, but the problem is that's averaged out from 0.65 to 1.06. Also that figure, so it's a fiddly number, and there are lots of fiddly numbers in the world of climate change, which is why this idea of kind of referring people to actual facts, I think, is really important. Also, you'll notice that what's happening is the references are all to organizations like NASA, where everyone would believe them. You know, you'd have to be very, very extreme sort of denialist to think that NASA are a bunch of kind of tree-hugging sort of leftists who, you know, are going to distort the truth. So organizations like NASA, we're always trying to refer to sort of people like that. Cool. Okay. Jack, any thoughts?
For me, it wasn't really the visual items that kind of shook me that much, because all the stuff like floods and forest fires I'd seen before. It was more the facts that they gave that kind of shook me. I mean, I knew the bushfires in Australia were bad, but I didn't know that they were that bad.
Quarter of a billion tons bad. Yes.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's more the facts that shook me rather than the visual tropes, because we've been so desensitized to visual tropes. But seeing facts like that really can make an impact when you're just seeing the visual stuff.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Cool. Very interesting. I mean, I think just the only thing I'd say is, I mean, I agree with you personally about the climate footage. I must point out, I am not an environmentalist. I have never been an environmentalist. And so I'm more detached than most people think that I did this because I'm passionate about this topic. I mean, I sort of have become a lot more passionate about it, but I'm not. Certainly wasn't an environmentalist to start with. I agree that we've all seen this footage before, and I'm fairly detached about it. I should say though that some people do get completely freaked out by it, and that's why there's the warning at the beginning that we have had people, just in floods and floods of tears from after this. So it just shows, just in terms of the kind of variations that there are in terms of people's reaction to things, that you just need to watch out. As scriptwriters, people react to stuff in lots of different ways. Okay, let us push on then, unless anyone's got anything else. No? Cool. Okay. And up, and up. Okay. Okay, can anyone not see a blue screen with climate emergency written on it? Great, okay, I'll push the button, the video will play. You should hear music. If you don't hear music, please say so. Okay, here we go.
I can't hear music.
Yeah, I can't hear anything either.
I mean,
okay. Try again. My mistake. Boop. This time you'll hear music. If you don't, please shout out. Okay, here we go. Okay now?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Yeah.
The ecological emergency. This is our impact on global ecology, not just from climate change, but also from such things as pollution, deforestation, agriculture, mining, and hunting.
What do you think? Since the rise of human civilization 50,000 years ago, what proportion of wild mammals has been wiped out by people? 80%, 83%, or 85%?
Okay, nice simple question. What do you think the answer is on a count of 3? 3, 2, 1.
83.
83%.
Oh, you guys are so good.
That's right.
That's why some scientists call our era the 6th mass extinction. The most famous previous mass extinction was when the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid. You could say that human civilization is like a new asteroid.
We are losing the biodiversity that is essential for us to survive.
We don't have time to look at every side of the ecological emergency. So let's look at 3 aspects of it. And the first one is huge. Ocean acidification has been called the evil twin of global warming. About a third of the CO2 we produce dissolves into the ocean, which makes it more acidic. By the end of the century, this could start to cause massive disruption to fish supplies. One early sign of this is coral bleaching, where coral reefs are being devastated.
But maybe the ocean is too big to get your head around. So let's try something smaller, the death of bees.
Bees help many plants to reproduce by carrying pollen from one plant to another. Since the start of this century, there has been a serious decline in the number of wild bees worldwide. This is bad news for humans, because bees help produce a quarter of our food.
The decline of bees has been called an ecological Armageddon. And right now, no one knows for sure what is causing the decline. Likely culprits include intensive farming, pesticide, climate change, and air pollution.
Air pollution directly affects animals, plants, and humans.
You can see this around the world. Many UAL students have personal experience of severe air pollution in cities such as Delhi or Beijing. But what about the UK? Well, in parts of the UK, air pollution levels regularly break legal limits. And what do you think? How many people die each year in the UK as a result of air pollution? None, less than 4,000, or over 28,000.
Okay, on a count of 3, 3, 2, 1.
4,000.
Under 4,000, I'm going with.
Or a bit more, maybe?
Actually, over
Sure.
28,000.
Let's try that.
That's right. A 2019 report published by the British government estimated that over 28,000 people die every year in the UK as a result of air pollution, mostly from cars and trucks. One possible example is Ella Kissy Deborah, a 9-year-old girl from London who died of asthma, probably triggered by air pollution. Her tragic death is currently the subject of an important court case.
Deaths from air pollution are an example of systemic injustice.
But what is that? Well, if someone is murdered, that is an obvious crime for which the murderer should go to prison. But what if someone dies because of air pollution? Is anyone held accountable? Not really. Instead, the death is generally ignored by the government and much of society. That is systemic injustice. A common form of systemic injustice is environmental racism.
One clear example of environmental racism is in the US. There, the Environmental Protection Agency has found that African Americans are 3 times more likely to die from air pollution than their white counterparts. And this leads to calls for justice.
Climate justice is a term used to make a point. The point that the climate emergency is a social and political issue.
So in this section, we're going to talk about these aspects of climate justice. Here, we are moving into politics. Politics is often a question, not of facts, but of how you interpret facts.
That's why, from here on, we'll sometimes give you point of view numbers, not fact numbers. So if we talk about a point of view, you can get more information about it and decide for yourself. Let's start with the idea of intersectionality.
We are all made up of a mixture of social and political identities that make us who we are as unique individuals. For example, our gender, race, class, sexuality, disability, age, and so on. The way that different aspects of our identities combine, overlap, or intersect is what is sometimes called intersectionality.
This creates varying forms of discrimination for some people and various forms of privilege for others. Often, the people who are least responsible for climate change are hit by it first and worst. Following on from this is the idea that people with privilege should center and amplify the voices of marginalized people, who often have solutions but not resources. The usual view is that the climate crisis started with the Industrial Revolution. However, one point of view is that it actually started with European colonization in the 15th century, and that Western society today is built on the legacies of that colonization. It was a structurally racist economic system that harmed both marginalized people and the planet. The legacies of colonialism still have an impact today, and they are accelerating the climate crisis.
One of the most powerful solutions to the climate emergency is also one of the simplest and the most neglected. Sexism has a lot to do with it.
Project Drawdown is a major international study. One top climate solution they present is simply this: to guarantee the right of girls worldwide to education, and to guarantee the right of women worldwide to voluntary, high-quality family planning. What do you think? If these rights were guaranteed worldwide, how much would it cut CO2 emissions in the next 30 years? 85 million tons, 85 billion tons, or 85 trillion tons?
Okay, give us an answer on a count of three. 3, 2, 1.
85 billion.
Billion.
Billion?
Let's see.
That's right. They estimate this could cut CO2 emissions by 85 billion tons between now and 2050.
So, are these rights being guaranteed? No.
It's one example of how the fight for climate justice still has a long way to go.
Many environmentalists see capitalism as the fundamental cause of the climate emergency.
In part, this is because capitalism often idealizes constant economic growth. Anti-capitalist environmentalists say that ending climate change requires the end of capitalism. Their view is that oppressive systems of power perpetuate the climate emergency and hurt marginalized people. Therefore, they believe, the solution to the climate emergency needs to be anti-oppressive, anti-racist, anti-sexist, and anti-capitalist.
But not everyone agrees.
Others say that capitalism can fight climate change if it's moderated by things like tax incentives and regulations. For example, look at wind turbines and solar power under capitalism.
Since 2010, the price of wind power has fallen 40%, and the amount of wind power generated in the UK has risen 800%.
Since 2010, the price of solar power has fallen by 82%, and the amount of solar power generated in the USA has risen by about 2,000%. And this is happening now under the current system. You don't need to win a general election or a revolution to get it started.
This is sometimes called a technocratic approach, because it sets out to fix climate change as a series of technical problems, without seeking to significantly change political systems. As you see, there are different political points of view here. And obviously it's not a simple either-or situation, it's a spectrum. But still, let's talk about your point of view, where you are on that spectrum. Feel free to not comment, but let's say that you had to vote today. What would you vote for to tackle the climate emergency? Political system change? A technocratic approach? A combination of the two?
Or do you want to think about it some more? Okay, so nice simple question. On a count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
Combination.
Combination.
The combination.
Okay, let's go with combination.
Okay, thank you. But clearly there's lots for you to discuss here.
And luckily, now it's time for us to shut up again and for you to think things over.
Like before, we'll pause the video now for a few minutes. Please say how you feel about what you've just seen.
Okay, so so you said you wanted a combination. What does that mean? So Jacob, what do you mean by a combination?
Well, I think that because, like they mentioned as well in the video, that politics are about ideas more than they're about facts, and I think going just for that might not be the solution. Because, as an example, they were talking about how capitalism is responsible for a lot of climate change, which I definitely agree with to some part, but I would rather say instead of capitalism, it's just like totalitarian systems that are responsible for climate change. If you look at an accident like Chernobyl as an example, that wasn't a product of capitalism, that was a product of communism. So I think that you can't really trust or put all of your trust and hope into political systems really to change it. Although I think it is a necessary part of it, it's not the whole part of it, basically.
Okay, very interesting. Cool. Albert, did you say combination? If so, what do you mean by combination?
Yeah, I did say combination. I was thinking about, I guess, less from a technical point of view and more from the sense that I don't believe that just one thing is going to change everything. Like I don't think if we just change the political side, then everything's going to be all well and dandy. You know, I think it takes like various things of what led to this, so various things are what need to change. And so that's what I was thinking. It needs to be a combination of things rather than just let's just change capitalism. Yeah, that was my mindset. So it's less like a technical point of view, but yeah.
Okay, so to be honest, I'm still struggling with this question because I'm still don't know how to put it. Because I think the thing is that lots of people who see this film, I mean, I said this is for people with different opinions, but lots of people who see this are going to be social justice warriors. And for social justice warriors, they have this thing where they say that climate change and social justice are like this. And you can't fight climate change without fighting for social justice. And that's the question that I'm trying to ask, but I haven't been able to find the words to get the idea across. So Albert, how would I answer that question to get it across better? The idea that that, you know, what's your focus? Is your focus social justice or fighting climate change, or do you feel that the two things must always be linked? Does that get it across? If so, how would you answer?
I don't know to either of those questions. I don't know how I would answer, and I don't know if that's
because I'll put it another way. I'll put it another way, which is something which I just came out yesterday. This charity, which was set up by the family of Joe Cox, who was a British MP who was murdered by a Brexit sort of fanatic. They have this charity called We're All One or something like that. They did this interesting survey of the UK public, and they reckon that social justice warriors are about 13% of the UK public. But about 90% of the UK public believes that climate change is a big threat and something needs to be done about it. So if climate change is only going to be handled by social justice warriors who say that social justice warfare must be part of fighting climate change, then the movement to fight climate change is missing out on 85% of the UK population who do believe in fighting climate change, but are not social justice warriors and are not particularly motivated by social justice questions, and indeed will be turned off if they feel that to fight climate change they have to also, fight for social justice. So Jacob, just hang on a sec. Let's do Jocelyn first because she hasn't said anything. Jocelyn, go ahead.
From what you just mentioned, I think the problem is that a lot of people, especially, I don't want to point out at the UK, I think it's a lot of countries in Europe, a lot of people are not aware of the privilege that they have. And therefore, being a social justice warrior is not the title they would give themselves, because that would mean that they would need to step back from what they have. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to give, but it's
right.
You have to take a step back and see your privilege from an outside perspective in order to realize that you're in a position to change something. Otherwise, this doesn't happen. And with climate change, there is no narrative that says, hey, there is, but there's a small narrative saying, hey, we're very privileged. We're here. We could do something if we actually want to. But that also means that in order to do something, we have to cut back on things that are nowadays just normalized. We can go into a store. We can get meat 24/7. We can fly, we can drive wherever we want to. We have a lot of technology that causes this as well, that makes our life easier, but ruins the life of others that have nothing to do with of people that don't even own a phone, for example. So I think making this realization and not coming into this conflict of hating yourself in one way, because you are aware of the fact that this is caused by you're like one of the percentage in this whole pot that causes that, is one aspect I think that we need to tackle or need to bring closer to people without making them feel guilty in a way where they're like totally depressed and shut down and think, well, there's nothing we can do. We might as well just lean back and watch the world crumble. And then there's another aspect where people, or let's say social justice warriors, need to open a door for people that do have flaws and do need to learn how to do certain things in order to be considered a social justice warrior, because that's also a thing. It's sometimes very exclusive. So in order to get into that, it's not just a group, but in order to get into that group, you have to have certain restrictions in your life, obviously. And if you're not following them, there's often this pointing fingers, oh, you're not doing it right, you're eating meat, that's not intersectional. How can you eat meat and be a feminist? Because that doesn't work, for example.
Oh, really?
According to certain people, yes. So I think
have you heard that said?
Yes, I have.
How interesting. Okay, I shall talk to my partner about that.
I have a lot of vegan friends, and well, my friend made this long post. I can actually ask her to send it to me, so I can send it to you on what the reasons are and why.
So that's fascinating and very well put, Jocelyn. So coming back to this idea of, because you see, that's exactly the sort of point that I was trying to get out with this question, but have so far failed to do with the way that it's worded. So with this proposed new wording, where what were we saying? Albert, remind me. What did we say? So it was
like, are you an SJW or are you an environmentalist or are you both or something like that?
Oh, that's an interesting way of putting it. Okay, so there's Albert's wording. Hold that thought. I think what we were saying was something like, is your focus social justice, or is your focus stopping climate change, or do you feel the two must always be connected?
Yeah.
So, Jocelyn, would that be a better way of putting it? Because that's what kind of brought out your excellent point, which is sort of exactly what the question is trying to fish for. Okay, all right, cool. Okay, Jacob, thank you for your patience, sir. What did you want to say?
No, I think both social international injustice and environmental change are two important subjects, and they are in some ways connected to each other. But I also think it's more of the fact that less that is done about it, about them separately, the more they become interconnected as well. And I think that's becoming more clear as well. The fact that, as they mentioned in the video, that African Americans suffer greatly higher risk of dying from climate change than privileged white people, as an example. And I also think that towards the future, I've already mentioned that before, but the discussion of like, particularly around the equator, and take, for example, like Southeast Asia, there will be like a big wave. There will probably be like in the future a big wave of climate refugees. And then suddenly you have social injustice and environmental disasters interconnected to each other, whether we like it or not. So I think it's more about the fact that like they are somewhat connected still, but the less we do about it towards the future, the more connected they will become.
Great point. Okay, great point. Jack, anything from you, or have we already covered with these excellent points we've had so far?
I don't know. I think Albert kind of said it as well. Like this sort of question is like a double-edged sword when it comes to capitalism versus technology. Like the different ways of dealing with this topic. It's a double-edged sword because if you focus on one element, like say you focus on the capitalism, politics is a very long and grueling process. By the time you finally reach a solution that could benefit something, you could already be too late.
Well, that's an excellent point. So
rely on the technology you could also, and that malfunctions, you could also be so deep into it that it's too late to go to the politics side of tackling it.
But okay, but that's a good point, Jack. Let's run that by Jocelyn, who's pulling funny faces, but that's not going to get her out of this question. So to paraphrase what Jack was saying, so you said, very, clearly and putting it extremely well, that for you, climate change and social justice are completely linked. What about people like Jack who might say that that the climate change is extremely urgent, and that if you focus on things other than stopping climate change, the risk is that then you've got this constellation of things, and you're busy trying to fix this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue, and that sort of loses a focus on climate change as a result. And let me back that up with what Jack would have said if I'd given him time, which is that I think there's an interesting example of this happening in Portland, Oregon at the moment. That over the past 2 or 3 months, there have been regular major protests in Portland involving lots of injuries, lots of arrests, lots of tear gas, lots of rubber bullets, lots of bottles filled with petrol, major protests, and those are basically around Black Lives Matter. However, one interesting thing is that, and we've had Americans on this, watching this film before, and one thing that I've checked with them, and they sort of confirmed this, is that at the same time you've had these gigantic wildfires in Oregon, where a lot of people have been killed. There's like over 20 people have been killed directly by wildfires in Oregon, which is extremely rare, and is, yes, of course, there have always been wildfires, but not on this scale, not with this level of lethality. And yet the protests in Oregon don't refer to those wildfires and don't. So do you see what I mean? So this is potentially an example of how, if one says, okay, these two issues are absolutely linked, that's great, and that's a completely valid sort of point of view, but that inevitably that means that there's less focus given to stopping climate change and more focus given on other important social justice issues. How do you feel about that?
I absolutely agree with that. I think that's a big issue especially in like the media world, that for example, the Black Lives Matter protests have been focused on quite intensely during the COVID outbreak, for example, whereas there were people dying in Sudan because they had no food coming through into the country. And it was a narrative later on, but it wasn't necessarily a narrative in the Black Lives Matter protests, especially not in the United States. But then again, I must say the United States is just a special kind of its own, and they don't focus on what we in Europe, for example, focus on. That's just my opinion. There's a lot of issues going on in their country where I understand that you can focus on what's happening in the rest of the world, but they've always been very exclusive and they've always been the best country in the world. So I understand that you can focus, you have to learn how to focus on other countries first. But some people are just not on, like, they don't even know what's going on in the rest of the world because the news that they have are just talking about their area and their districts, for example. So that's another issue that comes, especially in the United States, that obviously somehow needs to get tackled. Then again, I always think that there's an intersectionality between climate change and social justice, even if you focus on climate change only and you try to get down the carbon dioxide emissions in some parts of the world, you will still somehow connect it to a social injustice or justice in that sense. So no matter what you do, even if you just focus on climate change, there will be some kind of tiny part that will go into the social injustice or justice part. So I don't think they run separately, but obviously there is an issue with the focus pulling on both sides.
Okay, well said. Okay, so anyone else want to say anything about this, or shall we push on to the next bit, which starts to talk about what we can do as citizens? Yeah. Shall we give it a go? All right, cool. Here we go then. Okay, can anyone not see a blue screen with climate emergency written on it? Okay, I will push the button. If you can't hear any music when the video plays, please shout out. Okay, here we go.
The climate emergency is such a huge problem that it can seem impossible for you or me to do anything about it.
However, lots of big challenges seem impossible, but then things change.
For example, change often seemed impossible for people in the women's movement, the LGBTQ movement, and the civil rights movement. Of course, there's still a huge amount to do, but many countries have seen major changes in these areas.
These changes happened because millions of people took different types of action, including protests with pressure groups, traditional political action, legal action, using their personal influence, and personal lifestyle choices. Now we're going to look at how you can take those 5 types of action to fight climate change. And you can do them all this year. Action number 1 is obvious. As you know, you can join an environmental group. Of course, at the moment, probably the most famous of these in the UK is Extinction Rebellion, or XR. But there's also WWF, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, Stop Ecocide, Fashion Revolution, and the UAL Climate Emergency Network. Just search online to find a group that works for you, or create your own group. With those groups, or on your own, you can take part in simple, lawful protests. Assuming that you're in the UK, this will not get you arrested. But with groups like XR, you can also choose to get involved in non-violent direct action. This often involves things that can get you arrested and prosecuted. So make sure you're informed and be careful about what you choose to do. Action number 2. You can take traditional political action.
Lots of environmentalists are disillusioned with traditional politics and don't want anything to do with it. But traditional politics is where a lot of the power is, and there are things that you can do.
For example, you can join a political party, or you can talk to your MP.
You don't need to have voted for your MP, and you don't need to be a UK citizen.
If you're in an MP's area, it's their job to represent you. Many MPs have weekly surgeries where they talk to their constituents, people like you. Contact details for all MPs are on the fact sheet.
But if you can't do it through politicians, maybe you can do it through the courts.
Which leads us to action number 3, legal action. For example, look at Heathrow's third runway. In 2018, the House of Commons voted to build a third runway at Heathrow, to let more planes use the airport. But then, environmental campaigners took the UK government to court. They argued that the third runway plan was a breach of the UK's climate change law. What do you think happened as a result? Was the runway stopped? Were the protesters fined? Or was the runway approved?
Okay, what do you think? On a count of 3, 3, 2, 1.
Approved.
Approved.
Or maybe you could be a little bit more optimistic about the process of British justice.
I'm going to say,
Huh? Jack,
I'm going to say what's stopped. Just,
there we go.
I'm going to say what's
Let's go on a limb. Let's go with Jack. Bravo.
Yes, you're right. The court stopped the third runway.
So it was stopped, not by political action, but by legal action.
But you can also take action number 4 and use your own personal influence. You can educate yourself about climate change and educate others. Simple conversations are great. And of course, you can expand your influence on social media.
Here's our list so far.
Here are 4 types of action you can take to fight climate change this year. But will you actually do any of them? Or anything else? Please tell us.
Do you feel motivated to take action on climate change this year? Yes, no, or no comment.
You can say no, you can say no comment, but say something on a count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
no comment.
I think, well, we'll go with yes for the moment, but we note the dissension.
Great. But now there's one type of action that we haven't looked at
I
yet.
still love you, Albert.
And that's
okay?
action 5, the personal lifestyle choices you make every day as a consumer, like whether to fly or drive.
Now, some people say that if you really want to change things, you can't just focus on lifestyle changes. You also need to take political action. But there are so many lifestyle changes you can make. And research shows that when one person makes a green choice, it can influence others to do the same, which means it can have an impact.
So what personal lifestyle changes could you make that are really useful?
Well, to start with, what is your carbon footprint? That's the amount of CO2 released into the atmosphere as a result of what you do. So what do you think? Is it 700 kilos, 1.1 tons, or 6.4 tons?
On a count of 3, 3, 2, 1.
6.4.
6.4.
Bravo.
That's right. According to the World Bank, the annual CO2 emissions of the average person in the UK is about 6.5 tons. That's the weight of about 100 people.
And what if you want to lose some of that weight? A Swedish university recently researched the effectiveness of 148 possible individual actions. These are 3 of their top ways to cut carbon this year.
Number 3 is avoid flying. No surprise there. Though of course, no one's flying much these days anyway. But in normal times, if you avoid an economy class return trip from London to New York, you'll cut about 0.7 tons of CO2, or roughly the weight of 11 people.
But before you flight shame, Remember that some air travel is life-changing.
Everyone has a right to freedom, but some people can't get that freedom in their home countries. Flying gives them that freedom by letting them travel. So, what if flights are unavoidable? Then some organizations and people choose to fund work, like reforestation, that takes carbon out of the atmosphere. This is called carbon offsetting. It can be done through platforms like climatecare.org, atmosphere.de, or carbonfund.org. URLs are on our fact sheet. Action number 2. You could eat more plants and less meat. If you were a meat eater who went vegan, this would save over a ton of carbon per year from your output, or the weight of about 17 people. But what if going vegan or vegetarian isn't an option? Then be aware that the climate impact of beef and lamb is much higher than other animal protein like pork, fish, chicken, or milk. Action number 1. Switch to green power. If you're not paying your own power bill, ask your landlord or your family to do it. Switching to green power can save 1.3 tons of carbon a year from your output, or the weight of 21 people.
Okay, so here's our list. Here are 3 useful things that you can do to cut down your carbon footprint this year.
And of course, there are a million other things that you can do. Everything from cycling into college to making your own environment greener with a roof garden. But will you actually do any of them? Please tell us. Do you feel motivated to cut your carbon footprint this year? Yes, no, or no comment.
Okay, so we're expecting some dissension on this. You can say anything you like, but just say it on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
No comment.
I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll go with that as a yes for now.
Great, but there's one big question that can come back to haunt you, and it's this.
Why should I bother to do anything when other people don't?
Well, here's one way to think about it. It comes from Cristiana Figueres. She is the Costa Rican architect of the Paris Accord, which is by far the most ambitious global agreement to reduce climate emissions. Here's a summary of some of what she says in her book, The Future We Choose.
Every day brings dark news, and no end of people tell us that the world is going to hell. Yes, we think, it's terrible, but it's so complex and so big and so overwhelming. We can't do anything to stop it. This learned reaction is not only untrue, it's irresponsible. If you want to help address climate change, you have to teach yourself a different response. Take a deep breath and decide that, collectively, we can do this, and that you will play your part. Another, better future is possible, but it's not guaranteed. In the challenging years to come, optimism on its own won't be enough. You need stubborn optimism. Why is it stubborn? Because you need the conviction that a better future is possible. However, you also have to be realistic. There are always going to be barriers and setbacks. Nevertheless, that cannot paralyze you. You must be resilient. So let us begin today to tell the story of how, in the fight against climate change, we were not defeated by the setbacks we encountered. And let it be a story of survival against overwhelming odds.
It may seem impossible to stop climate change now.
But lots of big challenges seem impossible until they are overcome.
Now it's time for us to shut up again and for you to think things over.
We're going to pause the video now for a few minutes.
Okay, so quick question for everybody. How much does it cost to offset 1 ton of carbon? And Albert, there's a huge business here, okay? So what do we think? To offset 1 ton of carbon, how much does it cost?
Okay, sorry, I'm confused by the question. How much it costs to offset 1 ton of carbon?
Yeah.
Honestly, I have no clue.
Hazard a guess. If anyone knows for sure, don't say anything for the moment. But just hazard a guess.
Couple 100,000 maybe.
Sorry, how much? Yeah.
Couple 100,000. I don't know.
£200,000. Okay. Jacob, how much to offset a ton of carbon? Come on, guess. Don't worry. It's like, we don't care that much. Just say a number.
£100.
What? £100.
Yeah.
Okay. Albert, beg your pardon. How much?
I think it's like the alpha extreme. I would go like closer to 1 million. I think
$1
it's a lot.
million.
Yeah, I think it's a lot.
Love it. Okay, Jocelyn, how much?
Also be around like £50 to £100.
Okay, it's about $10. So that's what I mean. There's this brilliant business. Albert, you're a businessman. We could let's get into the carbon offsetting trade. We'll sell Jack a carbon offset for like a super discounted for you, Jack. It'll only be like £2,000 for a ton of carbon, and then Albert, you and me will like split the profits. However, there is one problem with this business model, which is that lots of environmentalists hate the idea of carbon offsets. Hate the idea of carbon offsets, and because there's this idea that if you can sort of like, and if you can buy, so Jocelyn, you gave this fascinating example, which is now burned into my brain forever, of someone saying that you can't be feminist if you eat meat. Well, we saw the difference is about a ton of carbon per person per year between a meat eater and a vegan. So that feminist who was being accused of, she could say, well, fine, so I'm going to spend $10 on carbon offsets, and I've taken care of my emissions from my meat eating. But of course, the first person would still not be happy because they'd say, but no, you have to change your life. You have to change your behavior. And it's interesting how, which sort of makes sense, but then there's this slightly crazy situation that certainly when in the responses that we've got to this section, people are very keen. I mean, not you, Albert, but other people are very keen on sort of committing their life to setting up allotments and gardens on the roof and all this sort of thing, where the actual carbon, where there's a huge amount of hard work for them involved, but the actual amount of carbon emissions they're going to cut is like trivial. Yeah. So I just think there's a very odd, and lots of people didn't want us to put in carbon offsets at all into the film because they were sort of wicked. It's sort of like there's, in the medieval Catholic Church, you could buy to have your sins forgiven, and this obviously was regarded as, a bad thing by people other than the Roman Catholic Church that made a fortune out of it. So it's that sort of thing. So yeah. Anyway, so but I personally think that there is if there is an awful lot that could be done in terms of giving people a gift card. What do you want for Christmas? Well, for $50, you can have a carbon offset for your year. And if nothing else, that's going to mean a lot more money gets put into reforestation schemes in, Southeast Asia, wind turbines in countries where they can't get investment for them. It would be a great source of investment for all those things, I think. Anyway, that's enough of my rant. Any thoughts on what you saw?
I think, I said that I wasn't sure on the final question if I was motivated to do anything to reduce my carbon footprint. Because of course I am, like I feel that I want to, but at the same time I know that today for lunch I made like a tuna pasta, and next week I'm going flying to Sweden to visit my mother for her 50th birthday, and then I'm going to fly back.
But
so it's very
Jacob,
easy.
it was carefully phrased in the most wishy-washy way possible. We only asked if you were motivated. It's a very low bar. We didn't ask if you were actually going to do anything. You just have to be motivated.
All right, yeah, then I probably would have said yes, but it's sort of like, I don't know.
But life gets in the way.
It does, doesn't it? Or rather, I choose to let life get in the way. Like, I could choose to get vegan again like I've been before. And
You're a lapsed vegan.
What?
You're a lapsed vegan.
Yeah, no. I was a vegan a while back. But then I was also like involuntarily a vegan because it was the household that I was living in. But then I realized that I dropped like a lot of important vitamins and iron. I didn't have enough iron in me and stuff like that. So I went back to my regular diet I've had before.
I hope you noticed that we didn't say you should become a vegan.
No, yeah, exactly.
We just said, the Swedish university said that in terms of things with an impact, that was something that you could do. Jocelyn, go ahead. You can't hate on Jacob because he's a lapsed vegan, okay?
I'm a lapsed vegan too. It's fine.
Oh my God. It's fine. Okay, well then. Fine. I should point out I'm a carnivore, so wouldn't dream of judging anybody. Everybody's beautiful. Yes, go ahead, Jocelyn. Yes.
I really like the approach of what we can do as individuals. It's very different from what I've seen before because, as I said, I used to be vegan and I used to like watch a lot of documentaries on veganism, and in a lot of ways it was extremely extreme to a point where I felt guilty for, I don't know, buying honey from a local market. So
you bought honey, God.
And then
Albert
I found out that
scarcely conceal his disgust, but okay, keep going.
I think the film really showed us that there are simple things we can do. I didn't feel pressured on like into anything. I like the way, for example, with meat eating, that beef and lamb was like the top 2 CO2 emission meats. So you can still have alternatives like fish or chicken. Which I find interesting because in none of those vegan documentaries or climate change documentaries about meat, this gets mentioned in that sense. Obviously, it's not good, but it's still better. So I think it's a really good and mild approach. It might come off as people not wanting to do anything because they're like, oh yeah, I already just eat chicken, so it's fine. But at the same time, I found it very relaxing and not like too pushy in order for me to be like, oh no, now I have to be vegan and I have to walk everywhere and I can't like fly. And it's even an excuse, like you can even fly somewhere, but maybe don't fly to a place where you could take the train in 2 hours. So I like this mix a lot.
Great. Well, and of course, obviously, it's made at UAL, and something like 45% of students are not from Europe; they're international. So another 20% are from Europe, and of course, it's almost always much easier to fly. But these are people coming in from India or China, overwhelmingly, and there is no realistic alternative. And so, yes, we're trying very much not to sort of blame and shame, because of course, this is the world that we live in, and people have to live in the world and so on. I should point out that a lot of this was written by a group of students at UAL, and the thing of not pushing food too hard, that was a very strong belief that one of them had, and I think she was absolutely right, because she was saying this is always the thing that and she's a passionate environmentalist. I mean, to the degree that she is going to court soon for XR protests, and she is at risk of going to jail. So she really cares a lot about the environment. But she had this interesting point that it's always the first thing that, environmentalists hassle people about. Oh, you shouldn't eat X, and it's so alienating. So that was yes. Guess what the thing that we left out, the top thing that the Swedish university said that you could do to cut carbon emissions that we didn't say. We said 3 of the top. The top one is Albert. It relates to sex.
No.
Something relating to sex is the main way that you can cut carbon emissions this year.
Educate girls.
Educate girls is, well, so first, Jacob, you're right. The top thing, this is Uppsala University or somewhere. Their top thing was choose not to have a baby, because that baby's going to be emitting carbon for the next 50 years. Educating girls, what the university was talking about was individual choices that you can make. But if you look at Project Drawdown that we looked at in the last film, educating girls and high quality family planning for women, though that's the thing that has the 85 billion tons of carbon could be saved, because women who are educated and women who have access to family planning have less kids, and that is a way to reduce carbon. But we didn't go there because the problem is that then you have to also explain that people have a right to have as many children as they damn well please, and we just kind of ran out of time basically. But the education and the family planning is the key thing. But it's important that doesn't then move into a sort of Maoist one-child family policy, which of course is completely different and totally brutal and oppressive. Okay, we're just about to get onto the last part, which is quite different. It's about creative responses. Is there anything else we want to say about what we can do as citizens? Or shall we get on with it? And Jack, all I can say, sorry, Albert, beg your pardon. Albert, next week, the next film, the next time, is going to be, that's the film based, that's sort of similar to The Raid. That's one that you will like, I hope, and everyone else will hate, okay? So just hang on, okay?
I don't dislike this. It's not like...
As you sit there thinking, oh, God, my life is passing before my eyes.
I really don't think any of that.
Green trash. God.
I'll just taking in the information. That's all I can really do.
Fine. All right. Very good. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get on with it. Let's push on to the next bit. Here we go. Okay, can anybody not see a blue screen? Cool. Okay, so I will start to play the video. You should hear music. Can everyone mute themselves, please? And you should hear music. If you don't, please say so. Okay, here we go. Can we mute ourselves, please? Someone's unmuted and sniffing.
What can we do as creatives to address the climate emergency? We're going to look at some inspiring examples by professionals and by students.
All of them connected to UAL.
But we've only got about 10 minutes, so of course we can't show you everything.
And we can only show any of these works for a very short time.
So all of the works that you'll see now, and many more, are on our website, under Creative Inspirations. There, you can see links to look at the works properly. You can also add new creative inspirations to share with others. With your help, we'll be updating the list and this video regularly. But let's see what's on the video now.
I still believe in fashion and the innate human impulse to express ourselves and create beauty.
In This Is Grown, I actually used bacteria to grow the upper of a shoe, and this was to show that biomaterials can actually be technical and sustainability doesn't have to be boring.
Within this triptych series, I've attempted to bring some light to atrocities that have happened in both of my countries, Sierra Leone and Congo.
I use anatomical manipulation to express stories of black female narratives. In both paintings, my leg and my arm is amputated. And this is because during the King Leopold era, they would amputate the arms and the legs of the slaves that didn't bring enough rubber or diamonds to the masters. And then in the Congolese painting, my eyes are white and like there's tracks of like rubber running across my body. That represents the actual tree. So that's where they got the rubber from. So I used that as inspiration.
I feel like by now, most of us believe in climate change, so do something about it. I designed a modular system of assembly. The garments can be assembled like Lego. You can slot them together, take them apart, put them back into a different formation. I collected waste sample books and scraps, and I laser cut them into those modules. Then I augment the garments, give them like a virtual outer shell. The shell can always be evolved, changed, like it can be updated. Sustainability can no longer only address the physical world. We have to work with the reality of like social media, always hungry for like new information. I was interested in this constant generation of designs for both our physical and digital selves.
2016, the hottest year since records began. It's January and the presidential election is imminent. In a packed room in Hilton Head, South Carolina, real estate magnate Donald Trump calls global warming a hoax. It won't be the first foolish, irresponsible thing he says on the campaign trail, nor the last. It's a thinly veiled attempt to protect his own interests and the funds which are keeping his party afloat.
The Dress for Our Time project came out of a wish to act at the time, crucial time of 2015 when the Paris Climate Summit was on. And what I wanted to do was to draw attention in a lasting way to the connection between climate change and mass migration. I think as creators, we're probably only just at the beginning of understanding what our potential contribution is going to be towards a climate emergency.
But anyway, I mean, but I think so, with the nature of my work, everything is upcycled. And the reason as to why it is upcycled is because I find myself very attracted to old objects. We'll just try to take this much sooner. For me, it's a time in history where we need to be discussing the power of garments and the power of clothing, and how we can discuss bigger issues, political issues, social issues, through garments, because fashion is something that's attached to everyone's lives.
I'm really interested in rubbish and what happens to it when you throw it in the bin. I've been investigating the processes that happen at a place in southeast London called Selchard. It's an incinerator that burns rubbish from 4 London boroughs. Why does it burn it? How does this happen? What are the processes that can be used to improve this place?
The bioiridescent sequin is a non-toxic and plant-derived alternative to the fossil-based plastic sequins that are used within the global fashion and textiles industry.
What's new?
Your work can really make a difference. Your work can make a difference by being sustainable, inclusive of different dialogues, and above it all, unique. We are burning out of time. It takes inspiration from the many wildfires that took over the globe in the past years.
Oh, a girl on the story. Sorry. So a woman on the call I'm just being at the moment said she was in a conversation with someone said, you can't be a feminist if you're not a vegan. It's all intersectional.
Oops.
I'm in trouble.
That's a big trouble I can't get out of.
It's this intersectionality thing. Everything's connected.
I have arguments saying that this raises the threshold of feminism. That you can't be feminism unless you are this. You can't be feminism unless you are that.
Exactly.
Put those type of priority before.
And I weave with these sequences. And my work addresses questions of how we engage with waste, how we value waste, and how waste can be reimagined and transformed.
This 3D animation film here shows virtual characters that I designed wearing my virtual clothes, which dissolves throughout the film into nothing in the end, but then it still exists, continue to exist in the digital world.
But they say you can't
I challenge you to stop thinking that you can't make a difference. Take that idea and run with it. Because if you don't, who will?
We all know there's a climate crisis on and we have to act fast. It's up to us as designers to imagine how the world can be better, to prototype how that might happen, and to convince people that that is the way things should be. History is made by those who tell the best stories.
I challenge you to create works that inspire others and advocate for something important.
As young creatives, we have the power to make change within the world. People will listen to you, and you need to make sure that you're the voice of the future. You need to challenge what's already in existence, challenge the stereotypes, challenge the hierarchy. That is what I would say to you, and that is my challenge to you.
I challenge you, with all of your innovation and creativity, to take up the injustices and fight for equality in this world.
Use your work to agitate change and inspire new ideas that will ultimately bring us a step closer to a more sensible, sustainable practice.
So designers are the best placed people to be able to rethink and reimagine our futures together, to better the world, to better our place in the world, to bring synergy between planet and people.
We are the young people whose futures this will be affecting. So if we want to live in a different world, if we want to move forward and grow up to live in a more sustainable world, we need to be the ones to design and create that.
We all have unique skill sets and different interests, and there'll be something within the climate emergency that you really can latch onto and create change within. Whether you're a photographer, a sculptor, a designer, a communicator, a writer, there is a way that you can help out.
I challenge you to break the status quo. I challenge you to disrupt. Above it all, I challenge you to have fun, doing what you love.
In this film, you've had a series of small choices.
But now all of us have some big choices to make about our future.
We are capable of making the right choices about our own destiny.
We are not doomed to a devastating future.
Humanity is not incapable of responding to big problems.
It may seem impossible to change the course of the climate emergency now.
But lots of big challenges seem impossible until they are overcome.
So here's the last question of the film, and the most important. and it's about you.
Do you feel motivated to apply what you've experienced here to your life and work? Yes, no, or no comment.
Okay, so it's a low bar, okay? You just need to feel motivated. You don't have to actually do anything. Okay, so what's it going to be on a count of three? 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, they said grudgingly.
Great. Great.
Great.
Great.
Great.
Great.
And so one last time, please share how you feel about what you've just seen. Because now it's over to you.
Okay, so were you able to hear me talking in the background all the way through that?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
How embarrassing. I do apologize. But Jocelyn, you see, I told you that I would tell my partner about that, right? And I did. And she was indeed duly horrified. So,
I didn't hear her answer though.
oh, well, she's shocked and appalled because she regards herself as a feminist. Indeed, she's a member of the Women's Equality Party. Indeed, she's running for some position in the Women's Equality Party, but she eats meat like a like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I mean, she's not by any stretch of the imagination. But anyway, so please forgive me for my extremely embarrassing. But it could have been worse or better from your point of view, right? I didn't actually do anything obscene or start cursing about those buddy students from Central Film School or, anything like that. So anyway, please forgive me. So apart from the accidental comedy there, did we feel anything positive or negative? Quite a lot of people do feel, well, some non. How did we feel about the inspirations? Did we find them inspiring or a turn-off?
I like the idea of sustainable fashion quite a lot, mostly because my sister is working with that herself as well. So I've already been part of that quite a lot and heard her stories and her ideas and her processes, which I find really interesting. So that I find really cool. When it comes to digital means, I'm sort of split, to be honest, because a lot of the devices in which we as artists within digital medium use to spread a pro-environment message, we do it through devices in which are very bad for the environment, like our iPhones, our smartphones, cameras and whatnot, like the mining that is going on in I think it's like in Southeast Africa right now, where basically all of the minerals necessary to create like the iPhone is mined there. So it's sort of like a split thing there, but I still think it's good. It's rather that it's something that needs to be considered as well, I think, when you embark on a sort of creative justice journey, you could say.
Sure. I mean, what they say, we didn't, we wanted to move on from, debate and end up with something hopefully inspiring to some people at any rate. But what they would say is that people have got those devices anyway. That they're using, they're doing stuff which works with existing iPhones, existing iPads. They're not trying to get you to buy a new machine. They're just creating software for that new machine. And you'll probably have that machine in any case. And the software that they're creating is, has zero weight. It's not because it's not a physical thing. I thought Mathilde Rougier, who's the one early on, has a very interesting point because she's the only one who mentions social media. And of course, everyone's moaning about fast fashion. But what drives fast fashion? I mean, one key thing is you got to have something new every week for your feeds, right? Otherwise, you look boring. And what Mathilde is working on is a way to create filters so that every week you've got the new fancy shiny thing that you can show off about on your feeds. But there's no actual environmental cost because it's just a tiny bit of code in a computer. There's no physical thing, as opposed to the huge cost of making physical clothes. Yeah, but very interesting. Thank you, Jacob. Well put. Albert, we got to the end. We're all, next time it's going to be Indonesian kickboxing action. It'll be great. Not a shred of environmentalism. So, did you find any of that interesting, or a bit of a turn-off, or how did you feel?
Just that last section, you mean?
Specifically the last section, I think, for the moment, yeah.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting. It reminded me of something I saw many years ago. The musician will.i.am, he takes plastic bottles and he recycles them to make clothes. And I'm like, I got that same feeling when I was watching that stuff that I got back then, because like it made me think of things that touch wood, I'm successful in the world and what have not, like minor things I can do to make an impact without me being like, this is what everyone else should be doing, blah, blah, blah. It's like me just doing my contribution, I guess. And so, yeah, I don't know. I found it inspiring that other people are doing things like that. Yeah.
Cool. Jocelyn, any thoughts?
I'm a bit. It depends. So I thought there were a few good ideas.
So, Jocelyn, do you mind? Do you mind just tilt your computer screen down a wee bit? Is that a bit too much? Okay. Yep. We're just not nicely framed. As a filmmaker, it bugs me that I'm thinking tilt up. We can't see the talent. Yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm always a bit. I don't want to say biased. I feel like maybe I'm not creative enough to understand different projects. I'm not sure. It's just for me, sometimes a lot of creative projects in combination with climate change or in environmental issues or social justice issues are personally to me very far-fetched that I don't have the comprehension for it. I thought there were good ideas under all of the ideas that we've seen. There's just a bit much. And some of them are a bit confusing because I don't really, maybe it was also because I had the audio coming in, so I couldn't understand anything. I don't know.
What audio? I don't know what you're talking about. Quick, stop recording.
I think the idea that stuck with me most was the shoe built from bacteria. That was something that I immediately thought, oh my God, I need to look into it. How does that even work? I want to know more.
Sorry, Justin, I lost you a little bit. Do you mind just go back a bit? Just start again talking about the shoe made from bacteria.
That was the idea that stuck with me the most, basically. I immediately wanted to know more about it and Google how this is even possible.
Would you wear such shoes?
Depending on how comfortable they are, yes.
And if they look good, right?
Yes.
Okay, because that's very interesting because I showed this film at Lewisham College. So that's a college for sixth formers, so like 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. And Lewisham there are sort of high levels of social deprivation in many areas of Lewisham. And a lot of those students came from deprived areas of Lewisham. Anyway, so they started talking about the shoes made from bacteria. And they were going, oh my God, the teacher was going, oh my God. Like I had to use my hand gel as soon as I heard that idea. That's absolutely disgusting. Would you wear shoes made out of bacteria? No. What if it was made by Gucci? No, God, no. I would never wear that. And so I'm fascinated. So it seems that, all right. So maybe some people will go for it. Okay. Was there anything you absolutely hated?
Not really. I thought the filter idea was interesting, an interesting approach, especially about the fast fashion part. But then again, the filters that I've seen in this video were so abstract that I would never even consider using it on my own. Obviously it's just the it's how it looks right now. It's not how it looks in the future. But there were some certain filters where I was like, I wouldn't necessarily personally use it, but there are creative people out there who would.
We look forward to you sharing your feeds with us so we can see what you regard as. Anyway, okay, Jack, any thoughts?
They're all definitely very interesting. I think what everyone said. I think this new fashion line is definitely the most interesting one to me personally.
Okay, cool. One thing about the shoes is they're more like a concept at the moment.
Yeah,
they're
they're
made
not
out of,
tested at the moment. They're not been proven at the moment.
yeah, I don't think you could stick them on and go for a walk in the rain without them just sort of completely collapsing. But the idea is to come up with new ways of making stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of making stuff, we're already 8 minutes past the deadline. So now, casting aside our ideas about, what we personally think about the environment, please have a think about this as a medium. So what we've done is we've had a film where audience discussion is not just something that happens at the end, but happens all the way through. I mean, I know what you're thinking. Yes, of course, it's at the end of each section, but still, the discussion is potentially, though that's obviously up to you to decide, the discussion is certainly intended to be an integral part of the film, and most sort of test users, when they talk about it, they do talk about the discussion as an integral part of the film. And so the interaction where you're shouting out, again, think about how that's taking you out of passive viewer mode and into a mode where you're actually having to express and say what you think a fact is, or express an opinion, or talk about your level of motivation. So it's kind of obliging you to think in a way that obviously some films can make you think, but with this you've got to think and you've got to say things. Yeah. So our second session is terrifyingly soon, just over an hour. Please think of a topic that you personally care about. Something that you care about. A film subject can be political, doesn't have to be political, but it's nice if it was political, where you personally are motivated. And think about how you would get people to get involved. What sort of thing would you want to do? So Jocelyn, before you were talking about political documentaries, and maybe I misunderstood you, or I'm just twisting what you said a bit, but I thought that you were saying that they're very kind of one-sided and they just kind of push one sort of point of view. Now, this is still pretty one-sided, the thing that you saw. Obviously, it's, people who, it's people who believe that climate change is real and that it's an important issue are going to find it a lot easier to watch than people who don't. But we do also accommodate, we've got questions where you can say you shouldn't think it be taught. You can say you're not motivated. You can, and then there are the discussion phases where it's completely open and you can say anything you like. So, but one could indeed create another thing about another topic, or even about climate change, which was more in the middle, was more on the one side, on the other side. So, for example, if you think about a trial, think about the format of a trial. So one project that I hope I finally get to do before I die is I want to make a film kind of like this, but in a trial format, where you, the viewers, are the jury, and you have to give a verdict. So have a think about maybe how that could be used. So there is a charity called Stop Ecocide, and of course I've been talking to them because their whole thing is creating this international crime of ecocide. So that would mean that there will be a crime like crimes against humanity, where you know, if some general tortures a whole bunch of people and executes them, and that's a crime against humanity, if the general then comes to Britain for a holiday, they get arrested, even though the crime didn't happen in the UK. But it's a category of crime where there's international jurisdiction. So the idea of the ecocide crime is that you could, you know, the president of Brazil, who endorses burning the Amazon rainforest, he would suddenly be in a difficult position legally if he traveled overseas, in the same way as previous presidents have been in difficult positions if they supervised, you know, mass murder. So trial format or parliament format or some other way to bring out discussion. What do you think you could do? And also just bear in mind that, as I was saying to start with, you know, these days everything's political, and especially, you know, for people who are in their early 20s, which certainly includes some of you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I can see, people in their early 20s, late teens at the moment are very, very motivated politically, and they really care about these issues. Also, just from a practical point of view, you don't need a big budget to make a film on this sort of topic. The film you've just seen has got a budget of, well, depends how you define it, but you could make a film like this for nothing. You know, if the people involved were prepared to do it for nothing, you could make it for nothing, pretty much. You know, but it's about allowing people to explore their political views, which people really, really care about. So now it's over to you. 5:30. Let's have an idea for something you care about. Could be political, doesn't have to be, but where a key part is the audience talking in the way that we've seen them doing now, which of course can also work in a cinema. You know, this or in a classroom. This project was in fact initially intended for classrooms. So we got the go-ahead from UAL in February, and then of course almost immediately all the classrooms in the world suddenly shut. So we switched to Microsoft Teams, but also that made it much more important project for UAL, because what they care about is community online, and giving students a sense of connection with other students, even though they are not seeing each other physically or they're not in the same country. So yeah, so for all those reasons, have a think about what you've seen and come back with an idea for something that you care about, which could use the same sort of approach. Sound okay? Yep. Cool. Okay. And Albert, it doesn't have to be political. If you don't want to make it political, something else. Any questions, or should we just get on with it? It's not very long. It's just over an hour. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Thanks, guys. Sorry about my embarrassing mistake. And see you in 5:30. Okay. Bye.
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 See you guys.